Welcome to a week in Pixelverse. Recently, Sony PlayStation announced that it was going to be pulling support for the digital online stores for the PlayStation Portable, the PlayStation Vita, and the PlayStation 3, essentially meaning that they are going to no longer operate the stores, and any games that were bought digitally or are being sold digitally through those stores will no longer be available. This has created a lot of concern among gaming fans because a lot of games are exclusive to those stores and not obtainable, at least legally, in any other capacity. And as a result, it has sparked a new conversation about game preservation. And it had me wondering who, if anyone, has an obligation to actually preserve any particular form of art. I want to focus on the idea of obligation because I think universally we can all accept that us as consumers, as fans of the art form, and as fans of the particular game that we are interested in, the idea that something we bought or the idea that something we would like to play is no longer available to us just plain sucks. It creates a natural emotional reaction to want to do something, to change something about the situation. And very rarely I have seen people express that game companies, whether they be the platform holder, the publisher, or the developer, should not be legally allowed to not support or sell the game or the product anymore. Still others use these opportunities to champion piracy of video games, which is itself a double-edged sword because while it may keep video games available for the future, it also enables active theft of current games being created and thus removes the funding for the art form which we, as fans, enjoy being made. And people need to be paid while making art, otherwise they can't live. Artists deserve to be paid because their work has value. So I would like us to take this as an opportunity to try to expand our thinking and see from the perspective of the different people, the different actors in this equation, so that we can better understand where our values lie and what expectations we should have of other people who are in this same artistic fan ecosystem. First, I want to take on the perspective of a platform holder, essentially someone who is running and operating a store, whether that comes from what we are accustomed to being the hardware manufacturers and their incentive to create stores through their systems that they sell, or through wholly digital stores like the Epic Games Store or Steam. The only incentive that a platform holder has, that a store has, is to be able to sell and earn a profit off of the things that they sell. And for wholly digital products, ideas like inventory or space management are almost completely non-factors. But while we like to think of digital products as taking up no space at all, in fact they do take up some physical space. To operate a store, to create an online service, computers and servers need to be set up in order to essentially carry out those instructions and communicate with our computers over the internet. That data has to be stored and then downloaded, reproduced from that storage location. Operating those servers comes with a cost of doing business. So from the platform holder's perspective, from the store owner's perspective, the idea of maintaining an infinite backlog of every system they've used to store their products that they're going to sell indefinitely essentially translates to indefinitely increasing the cost of doing business. In the short term, especially with digital products, that seems like nothing, a minuscule consideration. But if you take the long-term perspective on it, say your company wants to be running the storefront for games for at least the next 200 years, when you see that certain storefronts that you're operating aren't even profitable enough to support themselves for the next 5 years, they appear to be a drag on your business and a drag on your ability to deliver and sell games in the future. With that perspective, do we want to then make the statement that store owners should be obligated to keep those stores up, to keep those products up on their stores, so that any customer may have access to them at any time? It seems unlikely that any store owner would want to take on that sort of obligation, and also creates a very significant burden of promising such a thing when a new store wants to enter the market and try to compete or offer something more competitive for the consumer. No one likes the idea of taking on what is essentially an infinite cost. So if the platform holders aren't going to be the ones to take on this obligation of preservation, who's next on the list? Are the game developers themselves responsible for preserving everything they create? As a smaller unit, they certainly will have a smaller amount of games to actually be preserved, so this minuscule amount of data necessary to store the digital product stays minuscule over the course of a long period of time. You don't need to operate large amounts of storage spaces, only exactly as much as you need. And whereas many game developers are proud of their previous work and want to show off that previous work to as many people as possible because it always acts as a source of income for them potentially, we must not forget that perhaps some developers don't want to preserve everything they've created, don't want to keep it available to all people for all time. In the artistic community, this is sometimes called the right to be forgotten. Essentially, a person has placed work online that they don't believe is currently representative of themselves because that previous work was of a lower quality, was not reflective of who the artist is now. And a game development studio, as a collection of artists, may come to decide that the previous work that they have done is non-representative, and they no longer want to support that art. They no longer want to put it out into the world as representing them in favor of what they are capable of doing now. It would seem unfair to require an artist to be represented by the very first stick figure drawings they ever did as a child. But if a game developer does in fact want their work to be preserved, I would say it is reasonable to say that the game developer has to take that into their own hands, has to make that possible. They need to host their own game for sale, or keep it available in some other fashion. However, I say that as a contingent upon the desire of the creator, of the people who in fact own the game, and not simply a license to the software that was created. I would be very unwilling to say that the very act of creating some art that develops fans, or is somehow related to a broader picture of history, means that we have created upon the artist some overarching obligation or duty to preserve everything they ever make. So then the question becomes, is it the duty or the obligation of the fans to preserve the things that they care about? I would say in some respects, yes, because fans do have the ability to encourage or support the creation and distribution of physical media for the software, for the games to be printed on, and thus create what is essentially a historical artifact to be viewed at a later time. If they have the desire to share those things with other people, then they should and can share it through physical media. But if we can do such a thing with physical media, then why not simply recreate the process with digital? At this current time, it is undecided whether or not a video game counts as abandonware if the developer or the storefront or the publisher decide that the game should no longer be supported, or that they will no longer support or sell the game. This is mainly because different actors usually retain rights to the intellectual property as well as to the actual copyright of the source code itself, and not the execution of the code, which is considered the software, which is considered the unique product. Until somebody sues someone else in a high enough profile case and gets some case law on the books with regards to this matter, the legality of redistributing abandoned game software is still up in the air. I specifically say the legality of the redistribution of the software because the legality of maintaining a copy of software that you have purchased through an indefinite license is not up for debate. Whether the store, the publisher, or the developer continue to support the game or not, the fact that you purchased an indefinite license and have it downloaded onto a computer means that it's yours, and they cannot seek any legal remedy to take it from you. So in that sense, you can preserve a digital product for yourself. You can even store it onto a disk or some other storage medium. But I wouldn't say that these things create an obligation on the part of the fans to have to store these games onto specific mediums in order to preserve them. It is in imposing a moral obligation or duty upon fans to be the sole arbiters of preservation that we start seeing piracy as more reasonable or even preferable for the end of preservation. Especially once we have come to the realization that neither the platform holders, nor the publishers, nor the game developers, nor anyone in the equation has any ethical duty to preserve the thing that we like or the thing that we would like to play in the future. No duty to preserve something that we think ought to be remembered because it is important to the history of the medium as a whole, and thus to humanity as an artistic creating creature. But when you engage with piracy, unfortunately, you're not going to be surrounded only with good actors who share your same romantic ideals about history and your romantic ideals of the medium that you are a fan of. And we are still human. We want the thing we want the thing we like to be shared with other people, and we want it to be done so in a way that is convenient to us and eternal. To not have that immediate access sucks and will always suck. But in terms of the actual preservation of games and games history, though no one is obligated to actually take on that burden, nevertheless there are people who have decided of their own accord to make the preservation of the medium and its history part of their mission statement, to make it their business. When we were first discussing this topic in the SocraTetris Symposium Discord server, one of our members, BlueNeuron.net, provided a substantial list demonstrating that both online and in the real world, museums, nonprofits, colleges and universities, even the Library of Congress, are all taking action to preserve games as art and to keep their history available to be studied for future generations. I think as consumers, we are quick to see everything in terms of whether or not we are going to be able to buy something or not. And if we can't buy it, we'll just take it, because why wouldn't we? If we can have it and we would pay money for it, but you don't let us pay you, then why not just have it anyway? It doesn't hurt anyone, but supporting piracy comes with the unfortunate reality that we have the potential to create a situation in which someone does get hurt in the future. The tools of piracy are not only used for the sake of preserving history, but for the sake of stealing money away from the artists who create the things we love. And you can't discount either side of that equation when dealing with piracy. However, if we care about the preservation of gaming history, then we also have the option of choosing to financially support the people who are preserving that history in the traditional way, and doing so entirely above board. So I've included in the description a link to the same resources that BlueNeuron.net shared with me in the Discord, so that you can start exploring what ways you can get involved in the preservation of gaming history in the most proactive and helpful ways that match your own values. But that's all I have for you today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like and the subscribe button on the buttons down below. This has been your week in Pixelverse, and remember, stay true.